I never thought I would be the one telling this kind of story. If you'd asked me a few months ago, I would have told you my marriage was rock solid. I've been married to Lily for 9 years, almost a decade, and it's always been good. We've had our ups and downs, sure, but nothing serious. At least, that's what I thought. Lily was my best friend before she became my wife. We laughed at the same jokes, enjoyed quiet nights in, and made plans for the future. We weren't that flashy couple you see on Instagram, just two people who built a comfortable life together. I had my work, she had hers, and when we weren't busy, we were together. We were happy, or at least I was. But about 3 months ago, things started to change, little by little. At first, it was just small things. Lily seemed a bit distracted, distant even. She would come home later from work, always blaming meetings or traffic. I didn't think much of it. We all have busy weeks, right? But soon, I started noticing her phone was always in her hand. She used to leave it lying around, but now she kept it close, even when we were just sitting together in the living room. She'd smile at texts she wouldn't explain, and whenever I asked who it was, she'd brush it off with, just work stuff. Something about it didn't sit right with me, but I told myself I was overthinking. Lily wasn't the type to keep secrets, or so I thought. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, and I'd been excited about a quiet weekend with her. I ordered takeout from our favorite place, hoping we'd unwind with a movie like old times. But when Lily walked through the door, she barely said hello. She was glued to her phone, scrolling through something, barely acknowledging me. That's when she dropped the bombshell. "I think we should talk," she said, sitting down across from me at the table, her phone still in her hand. Her tone was calm, casual even, but my stomach dropped. Nothing good ever starts with those words. "What's up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, though my nerves were already kicking in. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, not meeting my eyes. "About us. About our marriage." I froze. This was the woman I'd shared my life with for nearly a decade, the woman I trusted with everything. And suddenly, I felt like I was standing on a cliff, waiting for the ground to give way beneath me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She sighed, finally putting her phone down. "I love you, Daniel, I do. But I've been wondering if maybe we're stuck. Maybe it's time for us to try something new." I could feel my pulse quicken, my hands tightening around my drink. Lily wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were fixed on the table, as if she were picking the words carefully. But I knew whatever she was about to say wasn't good. "We've been together a long time," she continued, her voice soft, almost cautious. "And I've been thinking, maybe we should try something different. Something to keep things exciting." My brain froze. "Exciting?" I echoed, not sure what she was hinting at but already feeling uneasy. She finally met my eyes, her expression a mixture of guilt and determination. "I've been thinking about opening up our relationship." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I blinked, trying to process them, but it was like my brain refused to cooperate. Did she really just say that? I felt the floor shift beneath me as if everything I thought I knew about us, about our marriage, was suddenly uncertain. "An open relationship?" I repeated, my voice shaky. "Are you serious?" Lily didn't flinch. She just nodded, folding her hands in her lap. "I've been reading about it. Some couples do it. They still love each other, but they see other people. I'm not saying we have to, but I wanted to bring it up, just to talk about it." I felt my stomach churn, and the words tumbled out before I could stop them. "Why? Are you bored with me?" Her eyes widened, and she shook her head quickly. No, it's not like that. I'm not bored with you, Daniel. I love you. But, I don't know. I've been thinking maybe it would keep things from feeling so routine. Routine. That word stung in a way I didn't expect. I thought we had built something strong, something solid. Sure, maybe we weren't as spontaneous as we used to be, but I had never once thought of our life together as routine. I pushed my plate aside, my appetite gone. "Where is this coming from, Lily? You've never mentioned anything like this before." She looked away, as if searching for an answer. "I've just been reading, talking to people, and I thought, maybe it's something we could try. It's not about replacing you, Daniel. It's about expanding, sharing." The words felt wrong, twisted somehow. Sharing? I said, my voice rising. Lily, you can't just throw something like this out there and expect me to be okay with it. This isn't some experiment. I know, she said quietly, her shoulders slumping. I know it's a lot. That's why I'm bringing it up now, just to talk about it, but I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that she was even considering this, that the woman I'd loved and trusted for nearly a decade was sitting here suggesting we invite other people into our marriage. It felt like I didn't even know her anymore. I stood up, my chest tight. I need some air. Without waiting for her response, I walked out the front door, the cool night air hitting me like a slap in the face. My mind raced. Was this really happening? How had we gone from being a solid, happy couple to this? I leaned against the porch railing, staring out into the darkness, trying to calm the storm that was brewing inside me. But one thought kept nagging at me. Had Lily already crossed a line? I stood outside for what felt like hours, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what Lily had just said. The more I thought about it, the worse it got. Was this really just an idea? Or was she already seeing someone else? That possibility sent a cold shiver down my spine. I hated that the thought had even crossed my mind, but once it was there, it wouldn't leave. I went back inside, hoping maybe she would tell me more, clear the air somehow. But when I walked into the living room, Lily was already curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone again like nothing had happened. It was like that conversation had never taken place. She glanced up at me briefly, gave a half smile, and then looked back at her screen. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone almost too casual, like she hadn't just thrown a grenade into our marriage. "Is there something you're not telling me?" I asked, standing there awkwardly, not sure how to even approach the question. "Why bring this up now? Why suddenly?" She shrugged, still looking at her phone. "I told you. I've just been thinking about it. It's not sudden. People do this, Daniel. It doesn't have to be a big deal." But it felt like a huge deal to me. My heart was pounding, and I didn't understand how she could be so calm. Are you seeing someone?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended, but I needed to know. I had to know. Lily's head snapped up, and for the first time, I saw real emotion on her face. Shock, anger, maybe even hurt. "What? No, Daniel, I wouldn't do that. I'm just talking to you about an idea, that's all." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But something about the way she said it, the way she avoided eye contact, left me with that gnawing feeling in my gut. The same feeling I'd had since she started acting differently. "I just don't get it," I said, rubbing my temples, feeling the tension building. "Why now? What made you start thinking about this?" Lily hesitated for a second, then set her phone down and looked at me with a seriousness that caught me off guard. "Daniel, we've been together for a long time. I love you, and I'm happy with you. But sometimes I think we need more. Something to keep things from getting stale. It's not about anyone else. It's about us. Us." She kept using that word, but it didn't feel like this was about us anymore. It felt like something else entirely, something I couldn't quite put my finger on yet. I stared at her, trying to find some trace of the Lily I knew, but she seemed like a stranger sitting across from me. "I don't know what you want me to say," I finally admitted, feeling defeated. "I'm not sure I can even wrap my head around this." She nodded slowly, as if she expected that response. "You don't have to give me an answer right now. Just think about it, okay?" Think about it? How was I supposed to think about anything else now? I went to bed that night, but I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering if our marriage had been as solid as I thought. Wondering if Lily had already opened the door to something I wasn't ready to face. That nagging voice in the back of my mind kept asking the same question. What if she wasn't just thinking about it? What if she was already doing it? The following days were a blur. I kept replaying the conversation with Lily over and over, trying to understand how we got here. Every time I looked at her, I felt like I was seeing someone new, someone I didn't know as well as I thought. She acted like everything was fine, getting ready for work in the mornings, texting me sweet messages during the day, even laughing at our usual shows in the evening. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us. I started noticing the little things more, The things I hadn't paid attention to before. Like how she never let her phone out of her sight anymore. How she seemed more distant. Like her mind was always somewhere else. We'd sit together on the couch, and she'd be scrolling through her phone, smiling at texts she never explained. "Who's that?" I asked once, trying to sound casual. "Oh, just Kara from work," she replied with that same easy smile, not even looking up. "She's hilarious." It seemed harmless enough, but that nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was overreacting. But every time her phone chimed with a new message, it felt like a reminder that there was something I wasn't seeing, something just out of reach. Then there was her schedule. She started going out more often, work happy hours, dinners with friends, things that hadn't been a regular part of her routine before. I wanted to believe her when she said it was just social stuff, but it all felt too convenient, especially after she had dropped that bomb about an open relationship. One night, she came home late from drinks with Kara. She had texted me earlier to say she might be back late, and I tried to act like I wasn't sitting on the couch, watching the clock, wondering where she really was. When she finally walked through the door, she looked happy, too happy, if I'm honest. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright, and she gave me a kiss on the cheek like nothing was wrong. "Sorry I'm late," she said, slipping off her shoes. "We lost track of time." "No worries," I replied, forcing a smile. "Did you have fun?" "Yeah, it was nice. We just talked about work. Nothing too exciting." She headed to the bedroom to change, leaving me standing there in the living room, trying to convince myself I was being ridiculous. But that gnawing feeling in my gut only got worse. I couldn't help but wonder if she was really with Kara. And if she wasn't, who had she been with? A few days later, I found myself pacing the house while she was out again. Another dinner with a friend. My thoughts were all over the place. I trusted Lily, I always had, but the idea that she might be hiding something was eating me alive. I knew I needed to talk to her, but I wasn't sure how to bring it up without sounding like I didn't trust her. But the truth was, I didn't. Not anymore. I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at her laptop. It was sitting on the counter, closed, her phone nowhere in sight. I felt a surge of guilt wash over me as I debated what to do. I had never snooped through her things before. I wasn't that kind of husband. But now, with all these questions swimming in my head, I felt like I had no choice. I needed to know if my gut was right, if there was something I had missed. My heart pounded as I opened the laptop. It was password protected, of course, but I knew Lily's password. I typed it in, and the screen flickered to life. For a moment, I hesitated. What was I hoping to find? Was I really ready to face whatever might be hiding in there? With trembling fingers, I began scrolling through Lily's laptop. My chest tightened as I clicked through her email, social media, and calendar, searching for any sign of what was really going on. Part of me hoped I'd find nothing, just a string of harmless work emails, maybe some text with friends about weekend plans. I wanted so badly to be wrong, but I couldn't shake the fear that I wasn't. At first, everything seemed normal. Her inbox was full of the usual, work updates, newsletters, boring stuff. I went through her social media, checking messages, comments, and nothing jumped out at me. No secret conversations, no flirty messages. For a moment, I felt a strange wave of relief. Maybe she had been telling the truth all along. Maybe I was just letting my paranoia get the better of me. But then, I noticed something strange. There were gaps in her messages, conversations with certain people that had been deleted or cut off. Most notably, her chats with someone named Mark. His name wasn't familiar, but I noticed that every now and then, a few messages were still there, just enough to tell me that something had been going on. A half-joking comment about a great night last week, a mention of some place they had been, and another vague message about meeting up again soon. My blood ran cold. Who the hell was Mark? I scrolled back, trying to piece together the fragments of their conversation, but it was like Lily had been careful to erase most of it. All that was left were hints, breadcrumbs that led me nowhere. But the fact that she had deleted those messages only made me more certain that she had something to hide. I closed the laptop quietly, my mind racing. There was no proof here, no smoking gun, just a name, a few suspicious messages, and a whole lot of doubt. But that was enough to confirm what I had been feeling all along. Something was definitely wrong, and Lily wasn't being honest with me. I spent the rest of the night pacing, trying to make sense of it all. Who was this guy? Was this why she had suggested the open relationship? To clear her conscience for something she had already started? Every scenario I could imagine spun through my mind, each one worse than the last. Maybe it was just an emotional affair. Maybe they hadn't crossed any physical lines yet. Or maybe they had. Maybe that dinner with friends was really with him. Maybe she had already betrayed me in a way I couldn't come back from. By the time I crawled into bed, Lily was already asleep, her breathing steady and peaceful. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my heart heavy with doubt and anger. I wanted to wake her up, confront her right then and there. But I couldn't. I needed more. I needed to know the full truth before I could bring it up. The problem was, I wasn't sure I could handle finding out what that truth really was. The days after I found those messages were agonizing. Every time I looked at Lily, I felt a swirl of emotions: anger, confusion, sadness. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I held back. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more than just fragments of a conversation. I needed solid proof of what was happening behind my back. But waiting, pretending everything was fine, was eating me alive. Lily acted like nothing had changed. She still smiled at me in the mornings, still kissed me goodnight. She seemed content, happy even. Meanwhile, I was crumbling inside, replaying those messages in my head over and over again. Who was Mark? How did she know him? And more importantly, how far had things gone? One Friday, she told me she had plans to go out with friends after work. Just a girls' night, she said, giving me that same easy smile. You don't mind, do you? I shook my head, trying to keep my voice steady. No, of course not. Have fun. But the moment she walked out the door, I felt that familiar twist in my gut. I knew she wasn't just going out with her friends. I had no real proof, but the doubts were louder than ever. I sat on the couch for a while, staring at my phone, trying to figure out what to do. After about an hour, something inside me snapped. I couldn't sit there any longer, waiting and wondering. I grabbed my keys and decided to follow her. I know how that sounds. Like I'd become a paranoid husband, desperate to catch his wife in a lie. But I couldn't help it. I needed to know the truth, no matter how ugly it was. I stayed far enough behind her that she wouldn't notice. She drove across town, not to the bar she had mentioned, but to a quiet, more upscale place I'd never been to. I parked a few cars down and watched as she stepped out of the car, adjusting her jacket and glancing around nervously. A few minutes later, a man appeared. Tall, well-dressed, with an easy confidence. I didn't have to wonder who he was. This had to be Mark. I watched, my heart pounding in my chest, as they greeted each other with a hug that lingered just a bit too long. They walked inside together, and I sat there, frozen in place, watching as my worst fears were confirmed. It felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. I should have stormed in after them, confronted them on the spot. But I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All I could do was sit there, staring at the restaurant entrance, feeling like my world had just come crashing down around me. Lily had lied. Not just about where she was going, but about everything. She had already made her choice, long before she brought up the idea of an open relationship. And now, I had seen the proof with my own eyes. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with questions, anger simmering just beneath the surface. How long had this been going on? Had it started before she mentioned the open marriage, or was this all part of her plan to justify what she was already doing? Either way, it didn't matter. She had betrayed me, and there was no going back. When Lily came home later that night, she acted like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, asked how my night was, and curled up on the couch with a glass of wine. I watched her from across the room, the anger rising in my chest, but I stayed silent. I wasn't ready to confront her yet, not until I could figure out what to say, how to make her face what she had done. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about an open marriage anymore. This was about betrayal. And sooner or later, she was going to have to answer for it. The tension in the house became unbearable after that night. Every time I looked at Lily, all I could see was her with Mark. Every smile she gave me, every casual "how was your day?" felt like a lie. a mockery of the trust we used to have. She acted like everything was fine, like we were still the same couple we'd always been. But I knew better now. I couldn't keep quiet any longer. The anger and betrayal were gnawing at me, and it was only a matter of time before I exploded. I spent the entire weekend trying to figure out how to bring it up. Should I tell her I followed her? Should I demand she come clean on her own? Part of me wanted to catch her in her lies, to make her squirm under the weight of what she had done. On Sunday night, I finally snapped. We were having dinner at home, just the two of us. Lily was chatting about her day, something trivial about work that I couldn't focus on. My mind was elsewhere, spinning with everything I had been holding in for days. The food tasted like ash in my mouth, and my hands were trembling under the table. I couldn't take it anymore. I know, I blurted out, interrupting her mid-sentence. Lily stopped, her fork halfway to her mouth, her eyes darting to mine. What? I know about you and Mark, I said, my voice colder than I intended. I know you've been seeing him. I followed you on Friday. Her face went pale instantly, her fork clattering onto her plate. For a moment, she just stared at me, wide-eyed, like a deer caught in headlights. Then, she looked away, her hands fumbling in her lap. Daniel, it's not what you think, she started, her voice shaky. Don't. I cut her off, feeling the anger bubbling to the surface. Don't try to explain it away. I saw you with him. You lied to me, Lily. You've been lying to me for God knows how long. She bit her lip, her eyes filled with guilt, but she didn't deny it. And that hurt more than anything. I had half expected her to lie, to come up with some excuse, but the silence told me everything I needed to know. How long? I demanded, my voice harsher now. How long has this been going on? Lily looked down, her hands shaking as she twisted her napkin nervously. A few months, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Months. My heart sank. So, it had started before she brought up the open marriage. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to keep my anger in check, but it felt like I was going to explode. Why? I asked, my voice quieter now, broken. Why didn't you just tell me? Tears welled up in her eyes, and she shook her head. I don't know. I didn't mean for it to happen, Daniel. I didn't plan this. We were just friends at first, but then things got complicated. I didn't want to hurt you. Complicated? I repeated, my voice rising again. You've been sneaking around behind my back for months, Lily. You did hurt me. Do you even realize that? She sobbed softly, her face buried in her hands. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop it. I thought maybe if we tried the open marriage thing, it would make it okay. That maybe I wouldn't feel so guilty. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. So that's what the open marriage suggestion was really about. Just a way to ease her guilt, to justify what she was already doing. My heart ached, the betrayal cutting deeper than ever. I stood up from the table, unable to sit there any longer. I don't want to hear it, Lily. I can't do this. Daniel, please, she begged, reaching out to me. I love you. I don't want to lose you. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can... No, I said firmly, stepping away from her. I'm done. Her sobs grew louder, but I couldn't feel sympathy anymore. I couldn't feel anything but the overwhelming sense of betrayal and anger. The woman I had trusted with my life, with my heart, had been lying to me for months, and now she wanted to fix it with therapy? There was no fixing this. I left the room, her cries echoing behind me, and slammed the door to our bedroom. As I sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the darkness, I knew there was no going back from this. Our marriage, the life we had built, was over. I spent that night in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Lily's sobs from the other side of the house kept replaying in my head, but I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. I was too numb, too tired of feeling anything at all. The weight of what had happened hung over me like a dark cloud, pressing down harder with every passing hour. By morning, the house was eerily quiet. I got up, showered, and dressed for work as if everything was normal, but nothing felt normal. Every corner of the house reminded me of the life we'd built together, the life that was now shattered. The kitchen where we'd shared morning coffee, the living room where we'd spent countless evenings curled up on the couch. It all felt like a lie now. Every memory was tainted by the betrayal. Lily was sitting at the dining table when I came downstairs, her eyes red and swollen from crying all night. She looked up at me, her face etched with guilt and desperation. "Daniel, can we talk?" I didn't respond. I just grabbed my keys and headed for the door. The last thing I wanted was another conversation filled with excuses and apologies. We had said everything that needed to be said the night before. I wasn't sure I could even look at her without feeling the weight of everything she had done. "Please," she called after me, her voice breaking. "We can fix this." I paused at the door, my hand resting on the handle. Part of me wanted to turn around, to listen, to try to understand. But a larger part of me, the part that felt broken and betrayed, couldn't handle it anymore. I opened the door and walked out, leaving her standing there in silence. Work was a blur that day. I went through the motions, answering emails, attending meetings, but my mind was miles away. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him, Mark. The name alone was enough to make my stomach turn. It wasn't just the fact that she had been unfaithful. It was the months of lies, the deceit that cut the deepest. How could I ever trust her again after this? By the time I got home, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the living room. The house was quiet again, and for a moment, I wondered if Lily had left. But as I walked into the kitchen, I found her sitting at the table, just like that morning. She hadn't moved. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I don't know how to make this right, Daniel, but I want to try. I'll do anything." I stood there for a long time, just looking at her. The woman I had loved for years, the woman who had been my everything, was now a stranger. I didn't recognize her anymore. And maybe that was the hardest part. I had always believed we were stronger than this, that our marriage could weather any storm. But now, standing in the wreckage of everything we had, I wasn't sure that was true anymore. "I need some space," I said finally, my voice flat. "I can't do this right now." Lily's face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks, but she nodded. "Okay, I'll give you space. Whatever you need." I didn't say anything else. I couldn't. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her behind once again, unsure if I could ever face her the same way. That night, I didn't go to the guest room. I didn't go anywhere near our bedroom. Instead, I grabbed a blanket from the closet and crashed on the couch, staring at the ceiling in the dark. My mind kept circling the same questions. How had it come to this? How had the woman I thought I knew so well become someone who could lie to my face for months? I thought about the open marriage conversation again, realizing now that it had been her way of trying to justify her actions. She had already been with Mark, already crossed the line, and instead of confessing, she had tried to twist the situation into something she could live with. But I couldn't live with it. I didn't want to share her, and I didn't want to share my life with someone I couldn't trust. As I lay there, exhausted and drained, I realized something else, something I hadn't been ready to admit before. Our marriage wasn't just damaged, it was broken, and no amount of space, therapy, or apologies was going to fix that. The following days were heavy, filled with silence and avoidance. I stayed at work longer than usual, coming home only when I knew Lily had already gone to bed. I couldn't face her. I didn't want to listen to more apologies or promises that everything could somehow go back to the way it was. Because deep down, I knew it couldn't. Lily, for her part, seemed to respect the distance. She left me alone, didn't push for more conversations or try to corner me. She gave me the space I asked for, but I knew it was killing her. I could see it in her eyes, the way she moved through the house like a ghost, careful not to upset the delicate balance we were both trying to maintain. But the truth was, I didn't know how much longer I could keep this up. One evening, about a week after our confrontation, I found myself sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. Some mindless show was playing, but I wasn't paying attention. My mind was stuck on a loop, replaying everything that had happened, trying to figure out where things went wrong and if there was any way to salvage it. But I kept coming back to the same question. Could I ever trust her again? The answer, as much as I didn't want to admit it, was no. Trust wasn't something you could rebuild overnight. It wasn't something you could just patch up with an apology or a promise to do better. And as much as I wanted to believe Lily's words, As much as I wanted to pretend we could find our way back to each other, I couldn't shake the feeling that the damage was too deep. Every time I thought about her and Mark, about the lies she'd told, I felt that same sharp stab of betrayal. It wasn't going away. It wasn't something I could just move past. I had been lying to myself, thinking I just needed time. What I really needed was closure. That night, I made my decision. I was going to leave. I sat there on the couch, staring at the suitcase in the hallway that I hadn't touched yet. The idea of packing up my life felt surreal, like I was giving up on everything I had worked for. But staying felt like a slow death. Every moment in the house, every glance at Lily, felt like I was drowning in what-ifs and lost chances. I needed to breathe again, to find some kind of peace. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than I needed to, just to avoid her. I wasn't ready to face the conversation that would inevitably come once I told her I was leaving. I knew it was going to destroy her, but I couldn't put it off any longer. I started packing my things while she was still asleep. I wasn't taking much, just clothes, a few personal items. I planned to stay at a hotel for a while, just until I could figure out my next steps. As I was zipping up my suitcase, I heard Lily stir in the bedroom. A few seconds later, she appeared in the doorway, her face pale and full of dread. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I stopped, unable to meet her eyes. "I'm leaving." The silence that followed was suffocating. I heard her take a shaky breath, and when I finally looked up, I saw the tears welling in her eyes. "Daniel, please," she choked out. "Don't do this. We can still fix this. I'll do anything, counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Just don't leave." I shook my head, my heart aching even as I forced the words out. "It's too late, Lily. I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this." She took a step toward me, her hand outstretched, but I backed away. "We can get through this," she begged. "People make mistakes, but that doesn't mean we have to throw everything away." Her words hit me hard, but I didn't waver. "This isn't just a mistake, Lily. It's months of lies, of betrayal. You've been with him behind my back, and then you tried to twist it into something I could accept. I don't even know who you are anymore." The tears spilled over, and she covered her face with her hands, sobbing. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she whispered through her tears. "I never meant to hurt you like this." "I know you're sorry," I said, my voice softer now. "But sorry isn't enough. Not this time." The silence that followed was crushing. I stood there for a few moments longer, watching as she broke down in front of me, and it took everything in me not to reach out, to try to comfort her. But I couldn't. I had to be strong, for both of us. "I'll send you the information about the lawyer," I said quietly. "We'll figure out the rest later." Without waiting for a response, I grabbed my suitcase and walked toward the door. As I stepped outside, the cool morning air hit me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't peace. There was still too much pain for that, but it was the first step toward something better. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living in the past. It was time to move forward. The moment I stepped out of the house and shut the door behind me, it felt like I was leaving more than just our home. I was leaving behind a part of myself. The weight of everything that had happened still clung to me, but at least now, I was moving. Even if I wasn't sure where I was heading, it was better than standing still, trapped in the wreckage of what Lily and I used to be. I threw my suitcase into the trunk and got into the car, staring at the steering wheel for a moment before starting the engine. The house loomed in the rearview mirror as I pulled out of the driveway, a strange mixture of sadness and anger swirling in my chest. This was supposed to be the place where we built our future, where we grew together. Instead, it had become the place where everything fell apart. I didn't know where I was going, but I drove aimlessly, letting the road take me somewhere, anywhere, far away from the mess I'd left behind. The truth is, I wasn't ready to process it all yet. The betrayal, the lies, the image of Lily with someone else. I knew it would hit me eventually, but right now, I was just trying to survive. I ended up checking into a small hotel on the outskirts of town, a place where no one would recognize me. It felt like the right choice, somewhere quiet, anonymous, somewhere I could disappear for a while. Once inside the room, I collapsed onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling, feeling the exhaustion of the last few weeks catch up to me. The quiet of the room was deafening after all the chaos in my head, but at the same time, it was a relief. There were no accusations, no apologies, no pretending anymore. It was just me, alone with my thoughts. And that's when it all started to sink in. I thought about Lily, about the woman I'd spent almost a decade of my life with. The woman who had been my best friend, my partner in everything. How had we gone from that to this? How had we become two strangers, on opposite sides of a lie so deep that it had torn everything apart? I wanted to hate her. Part of me did, but it wasn't that simple. I knew she was human, that people made mistakes, but this was so much more than that. She had broken something fundamental between us, something I couldn't ignore or repair. As much as I wanted to hold on to the good memories, they felt tainted now. Every laugh, every smile, every intimate moment felt like it had been stained by what she had done. And the worst part? I didn't even know how long it had been going on. I didn't know how much of our marriage had been real and how much had been a lie. That was the thought that hurt the most, the uncertainty. I had built my life with Lily on trust, on the belief that no matter what happened, we would be honest with each other. But now, that foundation was gone, and I was left trying to figure out if anything we had shared was ever real. I spent the rest of the evening in that hotel room, going over everything in my mind, trying to find some kind of clarity. But the truth was, there wasn't any. There wasn't a simple answer to why Lily had done what she did. Maybe she had gotten bored. Maybe she had been looking for something I couldn't give her. Or maybe it had nothing to do with me at all. Maybe she had her own demons she was wrestling with, and I just got caught in the crossfire. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that our marriage was over, and I had to figure out what came next. At some point, I fell asleep, the exhaustion finally taking over. But even in sleep, I couldn't escape it. Dreams of Lily, of our life together, haunted me, reminding me of everything I had lost. When I woke up the next morning, I felt hollow, but there was also a sense of finality. I had made my decision, and as hard as it was the right one. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of her betrayal. I had to move on, even if it meant starting over from scratch. As I packed up my things and checked out of the hotel, I knew the road ahead was going to be long and painful. But at least now, I wasn't stuck. I wasn't waiting for something to change that never would. I was taking control of my life again, piece by piece, even if it hurt. I drove away from the hotel, not sure where I was heading, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally moving forward. Away from the lies, away from the betrayal, and towards something new, something better.